When you check into a hotel and you present your ID, do you ever think that you're giving away far more personal information than necessary? The hotel only wants to prove your identity, but now they also know your age, weight, home address, driver's license number, and more. As soon as you hand it over, you lose control. We're often asked to give away too much of our private data. Once it's out of your hands, that information can become susceptible to hacking, the sale of your personal data, or a barrage of unwanted ads. But what if there was an option to verify your personal information without giving away unnecessary, critical, private details? Verifiable Credentials, a pillar of Web 5, solves this. There are digital certificates of claims that are easily shared in a private and secure way. They can prove your legal name, age, ownership of an asset, or anything really. Verifiable Credentials limit the amount of data you share to only what's required, and they can't be tampered with or faked. Let's reimagine how identification could work. With Web 5, the government issues a verifiable credential that proves your identity and lives in what we call an identity wallet. So now when you check into the hotel, you present the front desk with a verifiable credential and share only what the hotel needs. This establishes that you are who you say you are, without giving away more personal information than you'd like. Verifiable Credentials make proving claims easier, more private, and more secure.
Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. If this is your first time tuning in to TBD TV, this is basically a live stream where we chat with different experts in the SSI industry. We make it fun. We don't make it boring. I know a lot of things about SSI can seem a little boring, like compliance and finance and decentralized identity. But I'm super excited to chat with y'all today. For folks in the comments, tell me where you are tuning in from. And before I introduce our guest, I'll check the comments on where y'all are tuning in from. But I want to let y'all know that right now we're having an Africa roadshow, like TBD is. And we're currently, not me, but other people are currently touring different areas of Africa and educating them about our SDKs and different opportunities for decentralized identity and finance. So I'm gonna just show y'all a little like slideshow on how it's going if you're curious. So let's just watch that.
You said, like, when I came, you said, oh, I've read some of your blogs, right? So it connects us. We live in 2 different continents. You're able to consume my content online. Beautiful thing, right? However, if I try to send you money, why is that so difficult? My first trip to Africa, I had this wonderful videographer who captured me being here and like meeting with these different developers. And before I left the US, I sent money to him via my bank, right? And I got here, he shot the whole thing. He still hadn't received his money. So I've already flown across the world, conducted business, flew back home, and this man still has not received his payment. That's ridiculous, right? And so this is what TBDX unlocks so that we can do like these cross-border payments, and it's just as simple as if I were to send you money on like WhatsApp.
You know, we are very much focused on the potential here in Africa. We see that the need is like really, really great here for better financial access and access to cheaper payments and access to global, global liquidity.
Hope y'all like that. I hope that was fun. I see a couple of people in the comments saying that they're tuning in from Queens, New York. D says they're in NYC as well. This will be their first time here. So awesome. Thanks for tuning in. And also thanks for Ebony putting this up on the this link up in the chat that, go check out tbdex.io/workshops. If you're in the continent of Africa, I believe they went to Ghana and then they're going to go to South Africa and Nigeria. I gotta double check that slide that I just did. I can't remember, but they're going to different areas. So if you're in that area, you can sign up there. All right, let's engage with our guests now. I had them waiting for quite a long time. So before you all introduce yourselves, I usually do an icebreaker to liven things up. I feel like backstage it was a little live, but my question to you is like, if money were an issue, what job would you just do for fun?
I'll take this one first, Chris.
Okay.
What I kind of do on the side already is a hobby. So I work with my brother and sister, and we refab old houses up in Maine, and so then turning that into affordable housing. And where we've been working through that is then also how to expand into tiny homes and sustainable housing, and really kind of carry on the FinClusive mission. I know it doesn't sound as fun and exciting if there's infinite money, but we can spend that onto the housing cause because once FinClusive is done helping TBD solve the payments issues, so we can move on to the housing side. But that's kind of where I would spend my time. So turn my hobby into the full time piece. But it's similar to building out the payments networks. But I need to find simpler problems to solve. But go ahead, Chris.
That
No,
sounds mad fun. Sorry, go ahead.
no, that's a great one, Dennis. I love it. I would say for mine, I love to travel, and I would love to, as I get older, uh, host group tours kind of across the world and just learn and travel with people and get paid to do it. I think that'd be a great experience to be able to do. There's so much across this globe to see, and it really broadens your horizon when you have the chance to do it.
Oh, you guys are so fun. I really like all of these. I was gonna say mine
Yeah.
is boring. I wouldn't want to be a teacher, but
So I
Chris,
was thinking that piece, but yeah, kind of do that now. But then I've got to deal with people.
right. I like. Okay, Chris in the comments said, "Do you have renovation before and after photos?"
Oh, I do, but I send those in. Yeah. We've been buying a bunch of them. I gotta find those on my phone. Thanks. Yeah. Oh,
I
what
love.
were you gonna teach, Rizzle?
I would want to teach like English, just something basic. I don't know, but because the money, if teachers got paid more, I would be in there. But yeah. Okay, so just so folks know what we're gonna go over for the next couple of minutes, we're gonna go through like introductions. We're gonna talk about finance. We have a little quiz, a demo as well, of course, and we'll open it to Q&A. Just highlighting that other people said they came from or they're tuning in from Brazil and Africa. But Dennis and Chris, tell us who you are. What do you do?
So I'm the CTO and one of the co-founders for FinClusive. We started up around 7 years ago, really to address the issue of financial inclusion or really de-risking, de-banking of individuals and entities. Kind of paying pittance for, previous to this, I worked at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York in the IT risk supervision side, and then was at HSBC in the global corporates and commercial payments realm, and got to see firsthand where the pain points are in the payment systems, particularly on the international side, and how to get people into emerging markets into the banking system, because that really gets to be, I know it sounds kooky and corny, but it really gives you the financial freedom. Table stakes are having accounts, and getting the billions of people that don't have the accounts worldwide on, and even here in the U.S. helping to solve that problem. And it's not just the individuals that people are looking at. Whereas the diaspora is in there, where are the entities? Because of when we look at correspondent banking globally, how that got debanked and de-risked, and we would see it all the time. We meant it to be yes, let's get people in. How do we get to a yes instead? Where the banks took it was, we're going to start with a no, get rid of all this risk piece, not do it on a risk basis. And you're like, oh, this was a complete unintended consequences. So let's go back and address that system, getting people in, and then working through the payments architecture side. So as I said, got together with Ahmed, our co-founder, and our CFO, and Ahmed's from regulatory as well. We're like, let's take our crack on it because this is not how it's supposed to be. So we've been building the technology on that pieces for some time, and doing the outreach with the local regulators and the foreign regulators to say, okay, this is how we want to progress, and particularly when we get into having your own digital IDs and reducing that friction and the cost that it is and the time to get the people on board in the system.
I
Chris?
love that.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Dennis. So I lead the product and operations here at FinClusive. I joined a couple of years ago after spending 15 and a half years at Wells Fargo, working most of that in the compliance space. And similar what Dennis had seen, I saw that firsthand working at a large bank. Of it was always that, how do we get a no to a yes instead of starting with the yes? And it was a frustrating experience for me. I live in the Chicago area, and there's a lot of underbanked, underserved areas here that's really tough to get in to the banking sector. And that was a continual frustration for me as I was working with them, of why can't we try to expand this? There's so much great opportunity, and is such an impact to the community of ways to expand the banking services to them. And so when I learned of Inclusive, and I had the opportunity to speak with both Ahmed and Dennis prior to joining, it really aligned with my belief is there's more that can be done. And I'm thrilled to have been able to be part of it for these past 2 years to help build that.
I love that from for both of y'all. Like it was sounds very like full circle. I wish I was as like cognizant as y'all. I worked at Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston,
Oh,
and I had no clue that was going on. But I was young. I was way younger. I was like
the Bank
20.
of Banks. It's a good experience.
Yes.
Just understanding and explaining to people what the federal home loan banks do is and how they integrate into our banking system in the US. You're like, what is this whole shadow thing? Yeah. I thought the Fed was the Bank of Banks. No, it's also the home loan. Yeah.
It's a little crazy. All right. So let us know what FinClusive is. So y'all left your banking jobs and you were like, let's redo how
Yeah.
this.
We left the banking and out of the regulatory side and said, let's see if we can implement what was intended. So what we built was an orchestration layer to handle compliance first, right? That's the onboarding, and we'll talk about customer identification programs that you have to requirements to get into the banking side. And what that does is now I'm doing know your customer, and how we look at it is know your customer as an individual and know your business. We're going to do the compliance on the businesses, and that's been a hard part, particularly to solve, because it's not only do I need to know the business, but who's all involved, the significant parties, who's the beneficial owners that have the interest, who are the control persons, so your CFOs, your top people that have information on the accounts, and putting that all together. Because the regulators will say, I need to know banks, you need to know your customers, but really what they've started enforcing a lot is no banks, you need to know your customers customers. And so how does that go down and look at individuals and entities that are dealing with the banks? So what we've done is, instead of us building out each point solution of doing your digital ID, or excuse me, your ID credentials, so let's do your face recognition. Does your documents look good? Are you on sanctions list? Your telephone number validation. We've built some of those point solutions, but typically we partner with that. And where we've created is an orchestration layer to bring that all together. So we work with 30 plus partners and vendors, and keep adding on so that we can coordinate based on risk and saying, okay, if this person's in this area wanting to do this type of transactions. Now let's go ahead and we can push them through. We'll coordinate it with it, and we've taken a global view of it, where you'll have a lot of our competitors are looking at particular places in a single jurisdiction or a few, and not really concentrating on businesses as well as the individual to help solve the problem. Because with that, we orchestrate. Now, once you're onboarded, we can create our digital ID that can live along and support in a digital wallet, that says, okay, now you've been KYC, KYB, here's your underlying credentials. You can go ahead, individual or entity, and share those credentials so that now we can onboard. And we've been working with a number of consortiums and to set up these multilateral agreements where under the regulatory we can share and rely on other people's compliance efforts. So we've done that, and then as well, I built out a number of compliance fraud engines for transaction monitoring that really go in with compliance, because it's now, once you're in, what are you doing when you're in a system? Because the regulators are holding you to this. People say, oh, I don't need this compliance. Yeah, eventually the regulators will catch up. We're not displacing the regulators. I've worked in the U.S. ones and abroad, and those brick and stone buildings aren't going anywhere, and eventually they catch up. So, uh, uh, yeah, on that piece, what we say is now we've got your transaction monitoring. Let's look where those are going, and then we can adjust your risk as you proceed through the system and you age up, so we can go risk up, risk down on what you're doing, and relay that back to the banks. And we're very open and transparent with the regulators, letting them in. We've taken the view of, okay, no shadow stuff. It's here. Want to put a flashlight on it? Go ahead. We want you guys to see everything, and go ahead, and so that we don't run into any fines in any programmatic. And
Mhm.
it's like, let us move forward on these implementations. Uh, then we'll also partner with the different banking institutions, so that once you've got the compliance piece onboarded, we can go ahead and put you into a bank account as well in the US. So looking at on off ramping in the US, and then we partner with other payment networks, alternative ones, say, that will allow us to then, using digital assets, move the cash, um, let's say internationally, as the best example, move the cash and then convert it into US dollars for payments in the US network. And we can take money out of the US and send it to the other corresponding side. That's what where we've built up over the 7 years, and implementing that both locally and foreign. And like I say, when we need to, we'll build the products. But really, where it's focusing is get it in so that we can work with like yourselves and a TDB and say, now we want to go ahead and we can provide that in the back end. We can help you with the compliance components. We know what the regulators want. Our customers come to us and say, we know we need compliance, but we're not sure what we need. So we start with saying, okay, here's what you're going to want as a walkthroughs of policies, procedures. Let's start with that before you even get to the tech, because what are you trying to do? What's your risk look like? That's what a regulator is going to want to see. Um, and then let's go ahead and do the fun part of building the tech to help support that afterwards, and the personnel pieces. So
Okay. Some of
thanks.
it. Okay, so I will let y'all know I'm still new. I'm fairly new. I would say 8
Good.
months into the fintech world. So some of it I was like, that makes sense. I know those words. Some of it I was like, I don't know those words. And this live stream is for people
Thanks.
to like learn in public alongside.
Please. Yeah.
The only ones that I think we'll see more during your
Yeah.
demo, but the ones I wanted to point out, you did use 2 acronyms. I think I know what they mean, but some people might not. KYC, know your customer.
Just
KYB, what's that?
know your business.
Business.
So
Okay, cool.
on that side. So you're going to see that a lot. Those are kind of the tenants, particularly when you're talking U.S. side. What you're going to hear about a lot as new people is you're going to hear BSA, so Banking Securities Act. Was the original kind of anti-fraud in really put in to fight the mob back in the early 70s. So this was the whole thing. Like if you watch the Godfather series and Godfather 2 and all that, when they're in with the Senate and hearings, a big part of it out of it was this original Banking Securities Act. So how do we anti-money laundering side? Um, and on that said, okay, you need to know who you're dealing with. Now it's been revised many times
Yeah.
on that. But that was originally you need to know who you're dealing with and be able to track and keep records on it. That then says, okay, now you need to know your customer, know the businesses you're dealing with, and now you've got to. Then came the AML rules, which was reporting on the transactions. So do I see something suspicious in a transaction? So I need to report anti-money laundering up to FinCEN in the U.S. components, and then there's other regulators I've got to report to on that.
Okay. Cool. This was good. This was good. All right. So I have a question for y'all that might take y'all a little bit of a step back. And it might be, I don't know if it's like a spicy question, but I'm asking this because both TBD and FinClusive, we have like synergies, similar
Yep.
goals. We wanted to have like financial inclusion. However, when I often like tell people about this, whether I'm on a live stream or a podcast, they start like giving me like a little bit of a side eye. They're like financial inclusion. And I guess they're like a little bit burned from hearing about like this idea of financial inclusion before from maybe like past things that
Yeah.
are related to Web3 or decentralized identity or crypto that haven't really been about financial inclusion. So they're like, I'm not too sure. People at the top that are already rich always start talking about financial inclusion. So I want to know, like, what types of people um, do you believe are excluded from like the financial system, and how do you all aim to include them with FinClusive?
Chris, you want this one,
Yeah,
or I can?
yeah.
Okay.
I'll take it, and then feel free to add for the ones I'm sure I'm going to forget here. So really, our take on financial inclusion is, as Dennis was mentioning, there's been a great bank de-risking that has really occurred over these past 5 or 10 years of where banks are just tightening up their standards so much that uh, it's very hard if you are not a brick and mortar mom and pop type
Ah,
store that's a very traditional expected client. They don't really want to take that risk with you because they don't have the tools or potentially even the understanding of how to risk assess something. And that's where we've really curated this platform, is to help these institutions attempt to bring those people back into the financial system, of understanding a company can be risky, but there are different levels of risk for a risky company. You may have someone that in current day, as the laws are currently written, that are have some ancillary um, ties to the cannabis industry. If you have any ties to the cannabis industry, you are automatically removed from any nationally chartered banks, the Wells Fargos, the Chases, the Bank of Americas of the world. You can't hold accounts there. You can only be at state chartered institutions, and it's
really? As a business or even personally too?
primarily as a business. If you
Okay.
derive any income from cannabis sales, unless they meet currently some very stringent requirements, that's apparently hopefully going to change here in the coming weeks based on guidance that's been published within the last couple days. uh, the goal is to kind of help those banks understand, yes, there's a risk tied to them, but how can you mitigate that risk and have people who should be in the banking system be able to come back in. You have these cannabis related dispensaries. There are a number of them here within the Chicago area that have so much cash on hand that they have a very hard time uh, finding institutions to take it because of it has to be a state chartered institution. They can't take credit cards, so it's all cash coming through, and they're having to hire their own armored cars to bring it out of the institutions. So by trying to help these groups. This is obviously just one silo of them, but it's a good example of where it's a legitimate business that just in the eyes of traditional banking institutions is too risky for them. Our goal is to help them say no, they're really low risk in terms of what their actual business is. How can you appropriately risk rate them and bring them back into the banking sector for the protections that come from it, the ability to pay your employees in a more traditional way through your traditional payroll providers. There's a lot that can come by having the right banking inclusion existing. Dennis, any other you would add to that?
Yeah, no, in adding that in of particularly then giving people and individual people and businesses, I should say, access into the U.S. banking market as the largest one, but really into any market that they need to. But the international remittance side, it pushes people into more of a shadow banking and money transmitter components that aren't as well regulated in protection of personnel as well. What happens if your payment doesn't get there? There are certain things that are nice to have in those nationally chartered banks or other institutions. It's great. Venmo and PayPal, when they work, outstanding as an example, but your money's really not protected if something happens there in the bankruptcy and all that. So when you look at regulation, it's really to protect people when things go bad and aren't. It's the rainy day scenarios on that aspect. um, and then Chris was saying on the businesses, cannabis is a great example in the U.S., but then it's how to get people operating in here, particularly reducing the cost of compliance makes it so that banks or institutions are reduces the impediment, because it is 30% typically of their operating cost is the compliance piece. So if I can bring that down, now I can open it up to more people and do the proper job to onboard them into the systems.
Mhm.
That cannabis example was great. Like it made it click for me because I was like, I don't get what companies banks are saying no to. Wow. Okay, I almost think that kind of answers what Dennis said too. Answers my second question because I was going to say a lot of your developer docs and tooling are like heavily focused on compliance as a service, and I was going to ask what role does compliance play in the FinClusive ecosystem, but you all right.
It is the heart of everything that we do. It starts with compliance and security around that, and then you build around it.
Yeah.
Instead of being the bolt-on, to use the cliche of we from the ground up as compliance individual who started, we knew that was the pain point that the institutions are having. It's the issue of onboarding anyone. People get angry about it too. So how do we make that a better workflow?
Mm,
It's that friction when you're coming on and saying, oh God, I've got to provide this document, I've got this ID, and then you kind of walk away and it's like, I don't even know how to do this. What are some alternatives I can provide? I may not have that if I'm not a national. If I'm not a national of that particular country,
yeah,
what alternative docs can I have? How do I get into the system to interact and move the flow of funds for
yeah,
those pieces?
that
And
makes
it's really a case. It's not even just financial institutions out there that need to think about compliance. It's
Yeah.
really anytime you're working with a customer that you should understand. You should always understand who your customers are, especially as you're working with them. So that's why, as Dennis was saying, compliance really is the foundation of our company to help really anyone that needs to do compliance to be scaled in a way that can support them irregardless of industry.
wow, interesting. This is eye-opening for me, y'all. Thank you. All right, so we're gonna take a little pause so we can engage with the audience. We're gonna do a little quiz, and then once we're back, we'll have the demo going so we can see how FinClusive's platform works. I believe y'all are showing. Is it the Fin ID, Fin
Yep.
CID? Okay,
Yep.
cool.
We'll
Excited.
show some wallet sharing of how our KYC KYB back credential can be used in an unhosted wallet example.
Awesome. Excited for that. All right, y'all. Get ready for the quiz. I made it a little difficult this time, but I believe we need a challenge. We need to level up. So I'm going to go ahead and start it. All right. That was the quiz. Short and sweet. Let's get into the
You
demo
sure
now.
that a crypto isn't a magic spell or the same thing? I'm
Feels
very
like
curious about that.
it.
And I like
I
naming
thought
the
it was
actor.
super
Why not
good.
name
I
it
thought it was
Viola
super good.
Davis? Yeah, add the different ones. Yeah.
I'm glad people love that. I was like, I hope they think that's funny. Let's get into the demo.
Great. So as you're seeing on the left-hand side, this is our UI that's designed both for easy UI access, but it's also API enabled. So if you have your own native app or native platform that you're wanting to capture compliance information within, you're able to send that directly to us via those REST APIs and receive the responses back that I'll show you here in a second. On the right-hand side is an unhosted wallet provider that we have done this proof of concept with Verita, and it's a good example of our compliance credential being able to be shared into those wallets. We've also worked with hosted wallet solutions of excuse me, in a way of designing this so it really can be agnostic of wallet and really broaden that ecosystem approach of where you can build up that supermarket of institutions that are willing to accept those shareable credentials for easy access into the system. So how we've designed this to kick off the process, say you're coming into Acme Bank, you want to open up an account, you don't have anything existing with them, so you need to provide some level of KYC to them. In an ideal situation, you've already gone through the process and have a credential sitting in your wallet. But in those cases of where you may not have a credential sitting, you can just simply pull up your QR reader, scan that QR code, and for ours, it brings you directly into our web form that is working with their APIs to send that data to us. We've designed these in a way that they can be put directly into customers' workflow and have it be customized to their specific needs. We've worked with some financial institutions where we've combined various pieces of their onboarding flows, other forms to really simplify it and make it a better client experience at the end of the day. But as you can see, it's your standard information. Apologize for the screen share delay here to catch up. It's really that standard set of information you're used to doing today. And the goal is with our credential is once you've done it once and had it issued to your wallet, you're not going to have to keep doing it. You're going to have it sitting in the wallet and you can share it among those various ecosystems. A good example of that in a closed ecosystem way would be, say you are applying for a loan at one of the large banking institutions where maybe you already have a bank account and now you're going in to do the loan for a new car. And in today's day and age, you're continually having to share that information, even though you're already a customer. In the closed ecosystem approach, you would be able to just share this credential that's about to go into the wallet and just keep moving through the process and do it in a matter of seconds. So we've completed the form, submitted it through, and then you'll be able to see it now sitting within my wallet once it catches up here. For those of you that have used Lonely Screen, you know it is not the most responsive app in the world.
This is cool though.
Oh, thank you. Um, just a second to catch up. So as it's catching up here, I'll go ahead and show a couple pieces of the dashboard. So as you submitted it through, it's coming into our dashboard for processing. We're showing and gathering those key pieces of information that we are that were self-declared. As we discussed, there's that FinClusive ID that really serves as the foundation for each of our credentials. And it serves as that unique identifier that allows it to be shared. So you can see that information assigned. And then we also assign that risk rating to the device, or excuse me, to the individual or entity that is being screened. And that risk rating is what allows for us to work with those institutions and say, we've assessed the risk on a consistent basis of of this individual, and we've assigned this risk rating. And depending on what that risk rating is, it may have undergone different levels of check. So it could be transaction-based risk, where they're going to be doing X amount of transactions. It could be a sanctions risk or a jurisdictional risk. But how we've structured the platform, as Des mentioned, is a way to provide a consistent tool in those risk profiles to our banking partners, to insurance providers, to anyone that really could be part of the ecosystem, to have a common standard of risk to help those what have been de-risked by the traditional banking institutions to see, okay, within a traditional risk model, yes, they may be too risky, but now with additional tools and support around it, we can see, okay, this entity really isn't as risky because they meet the various criteria that may be needed to allow them to operate within there, or it shows that they have the right controls in place to be even though they're in a risky industry, they're low risk within that risky industry. And then we run those compliance checks, as Dennis mentioned. We work with a network of providers, and we go out and screen them. In this case here, you'll see just a couple checks took place within this demo environment, but this list could be 20 or 30 by the time you start bringing in document validation, liveness checks, additional address verifications. But all of that can be assigned into the credential itself. So now you'll see on the right-hand side, my screen caught up, and it's undergoing validation that yes, it's still in a valid status, so it can be shared. Because one key thing with verifiable credentials is making sure that the platform and the credential itself is continually being screened. You don't want to screen someone and not look at them again for 6 months, because their entire situation may have changed within that time. So each of our credentials undergo ongoing monitoring. So if there's ever a change to their eligibility, it's going to move into the additional status. So say in this case, Franklin showed up as a potential sanctions match. So now he's in an in review status, while the originating onboard institution works to determine, can I continue to do business with them? Is there a case of where, and you're going to see on the right-hand side, I'm waiting for the database to catch up. So is it a case of where there is a true regulatory reason why I couldn't continue to bank them, that say they are on a sanctions list where no business can be done? It's a case of where there's no level of de-risking that can take place. They do have to be exited. But when that occurs, you'll see now this is in a temporary suspended status. So that credential now can't continue to be shared broadly across the ecosystem. So the original onboarding institution is notified of the change. Any of the verifiers that have taken place and use the credential are also notified through either a webhook or email notification that there's been a change in status. So it allows for that credential to remain dynamic, and those institutions to know as they accept the credentials, and that yes, they can continue to use it and that it's safe to use. So say now in Franklin's case, he's gone through, he's been cleared, and now his credential will become valid again for him to continue to use it. Those sharing institutions are once again notified that they can continue to use it, and that Franklin is who he says it is, and he can continue to move forward. I noticed there are a couple of questions in the Q&A, so give me just to catch up on them. But Dennis, anything additional you would add, kind of what we walked through here on the credentialing side?
Yeah, no, and the other part, just to look at it, is this could be, in the back end. So TBD on the wallet can be calling FinClusive to do the compliance piece. So a lot of times you're not going to be seeing these components. So it's when they are looking it up, and TBD is issuing out their wallet in the back end. What are the credentials? Who's validating it? That can be FinClusive. So really, it can be operating the back end for different wallet providers on that side.
Oh, okay. So seeing this demo really, like when Dennis first explained like what FinClusive does, this really like brought it together for me. I love the whole like you all giving the grade for the risk,
Yeah.
because that way, people aren't just coming up with their own ideas. Like, oh, this is risky. No, we're like, we have a standard.
Yeah.
And then I never thought about the fact that verifiable credentials should be continuously like checked. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do have questions. We have a few questions. And this one, we have a couple of community members. Some of them are in different countries. This one is in Brazil. And Andre's saying, like, suppose a Brazilian banking institution wants to like leverage your tools. What would the flow be like? What are the protocols used in order to implement this flow? And I guess they asked us before you started doing the demo.
Dennis, do you mind taking that one?
Fair. So there's a couple of different ways it can work. Sometimes if it's just that direct institution, they'll integrate with us using APIs in the back end. So that institution controls the front end. They can control the wallet. They can control their traditional web app, mobile app that then calls FinClusive to do those compliance checks and issue the Finc ID for them. So that's the main way that happens. Now we can work it as Chris was kind of showing with the wallet side. If Inclusive can issue the wallet, but typically it's our partners are doing it. Where we concentrate on is that back end piece of doing the compliance. We've got the Finc ID to support that, but the Finc ID just becomes part of that banking institution's wallet or a TBD wallet side for it, because that's where we want to maintain. That's where we're kind of what separates us on the secret sauce is understanding that compliance piece, the ongoing. So we consult and say, okay, here's what you're going to want to implement, um, giving the best practices based on the international standards. Now, bank, you go ahead and implement into our APIs for your own wallet side. There are different protocols we can look at because we do support and operate on different networks. On that side too, and so different protocols come into play depending on which network you're looking at to implement on, or the blockchain side for it. But primarily, it's the banks integrating directly to us and then exposing on their app.
Yeah, it's really we sit in that position of a utility for these banks, for these wallet providers, of providing these required services nowadays that they can easily integrate into and allow them to know that they are in compliance without having to design that program themselves. That's something we can help these institutions do. We have a very comprehensive rule book that is open source that we have put out there to really help a company understand how to stand up an AML program, and that's what a lot of this platform is based on. Is what's gotten into that design from Dennis and Amit's experience with the regulatory side. It really helps those more uh, junior companies really learn what they need to do and help them work towards a compliant status.
Okay, next question. This one's a two-parter from OK Jodam. The first one is from FinClusive's perspective. How do KYC and KYB patterns vary across markets?
So really, it depends on what actions you're taking. Because if we compare the same action, let's just say you're doing local payments or a local payment side in a low value type of thing, they're going to be based on very similar practices of how do I determine a know your customer, know your business aspect. And then they'll vary in different degrees of now I want to do something that's perceived or an inherent risk as high risk. So I'm going to do a cross border payment now. Most of them will actually start to look very similar. Where it gets different and unique is what data or information is available for source documents and being able to go to say the government issuance side and opening up. Like in Nigeria, you've got the BVN, the bank validation number, so you can look into that and provide in. So it's saying in each individual country, how do I link in? It's similar, in the States. How do I link into the the different driver's license issuance of each of the states? I know they're starting to kind of get better sharing on the digital side, but it becomes the same kind of problem of now individualizing where is that source information coming from. because yeah, I can go to data aggregators, but the best source is who issued it at the government side and being able to tie those back in. So it's very similar of the checks I would perform. I want to make sure that this document was issued by the government. It's a real document. It's not some synthetic type of fraud. Where it gets unique is what is available in each jurisdiction so that I can perform that check on a digital way. And even sometimes we have to back into a manual process. There's certain jurisdictions in emerging markets where there is no digital record, digital source online. You can't, and the data aggregators aren't there. We will have to rely. We've done it where we rely on individuals to go into government offices, digitize, request the documents, digitize them, and send them back so that we can do a know your business or a know your customer type of check. So very similar as in how they would take it, very similar, even the checks differs on inherent risk as you step up, but it's going to be the same kind of across the globe. 90% of it's going to be about the same checks performed. And that difference is what's my sources that I can plug into for a particular jurisdiction.
Yeah. And I think part of towards the second question there, our platform is designed really towards the Financial Action Task Force or FATF standards, which is the global view of AML, KYC, KYB of how programs should be managed. So that's largely what we built the rule book towards, how we've designed the platform is to really drive towards that common standard. So we aren't seeing such disparate differences between each market of what's considered an acceptable piece. It's let's focus on the 80% we all agree on, and then leave that last 20% to the individual markets while we work to get closer to 100.
All right, and then the last question that I'm seeing is a follow-up from OK Jodam saying, is it possible, like in your demo, for Franklin Wells to use his VCs outside of your FinClusive partner networks? If so, how would they?
So, go ahead, Dennis.
No, you got it.
Okay. So that is the answer is yes and no. The way we've designed our API calls is individuals can call into. I know you pulled down the screen share, but there's a service that we offer, which is more of a Web 2 based focus of a CDD check, and within that you could see a lot of that same information. So let me just put in his Finc ID, and you're able to call these endpoints and receive those results that were part of it. And so, but the important thing here is you're not having to share that underlying information. We're only going to share that in this demo example for Franklin, everything passed, and the checks that were done, and who we use as a validation source. So that is largely how it can be shared globally is by calling those CDD checkpoints. Now, what we're working towards, I know what TBD is working towards, is trying to build that ecosystem of where you can share broadly, and that's really where those wallet providers, the various networks, start talking to each other. It's, you almost think that back in the days of email, where you couldn't send an outside email from, say, AOL to Yahoo in the early days. It was restricted, and it's starting to open up those pieces to try to more broadly expand and solve that cross ecosystem issue of being able, now you can send your Gmail to Hotmail to at company domain. That's we've reached that stage, and that's largely where credential sharing needs to get to see its expected success, is that wide ability to share. Dennis, anything you would add to that?
I think that's correct. Yeah. So it is expanding it that you can do that lookup later on of Franklin outside the network. You may not be able to get all the underlying. So it is available for now. You could take it with that Finc ID and perform the lookup of Franklin's underlying what tests were performed and what were the results on it. But to be able to kind of do the updates onto the underlying or anything like that and share, you would have to be part of the network or have a multilateral agreement between those networks to share that data.
Okay, that makes sense, and I think that gets us to the end of the audience Q&A. I also, side note, did not know that you couldn't send emails from one to another, but maybe I was too young. But okay, I only had one question after all of this, like from myself, and I watched this video. I wish Amit was here, but he was like talking to the U.S. House Committee about like de-risking like the Caribbean, and I was
Mhm.
curious what parts of like Caribbean bank, like what makes it risky? Like yeah, that's really my question. Like why do they need to de-risk them? Why are banks nervous, or what was the context?
I mean, historically, where it had been, where I was getting back into people saying we're just going to get rid of people, there was a perception that certain banking institutions, things like that in the Caribbean, were used to facilitate money laundering activities. Um, and so this is where they said, okay, just because there may have been a few bad actors, we're going to do a whole inherent risk of maybe one banking institution in a particular country was lax on their KYC, KYB, which facilitated money laundering. What got the problem is they lost the nuance in that and said, now we're just going to say this whole country is a inherently it's a high risk. And if I don't have a good compliance program that really looks into what are you trying to do, who are you, things like that, and implement controls and then reduce the residual risk components. If I don't have that, certain places we're just wholesale blanket going up. You're this country. I'm not even going to look into it. I'm going to de-risk and debank you on that side, and I'm going to cut out the correspondent banking because this correspondent banking is a bank is then talking to a bank in the U.S. Let's say from the Caribbean. Um, Now that U.S. bank is responsible for saying, "Hey, Caribbean bank, what did you do for compliance of those customers that you're sending, and who are the customers of your customer on that piece?" And they may not have had that information. They said, "Okay, we're going to cut it." So it was Caribbean banks having to step up, but not to obviously say it's the Caribbean. It's just a problem anywhere of people saying, "Hey, if I've got this bad one, I'm going to put it in." Um, because relatively stable governments, things like that, it really had been facilitating on the money laundering components of it. Is
And I
characteristic.
and I think even today you're seeing it over the last 6 to 12 months, specifically in the banking as a service space as well. You're seeing a lot of those similar institutions that have uh, tried to act as banks but not be a bank run into these similar type situations of not always having the right services there to show that they as the banking as a service or company, not knowing necessarily their customers underneath. They thought their bank that they used for the actual money movement was doing the due diligence. So I think you're seeing a similar occurrence now within the fintech space of that de-risking still occurring today.
Thank you. That really helps because I am Peruvian, and I was like, I don't get the context, but I think it totally makes sense. There is a lot of
It's
corruption.
unfortunate why what happened. Yeah,
This is great. All right, thank you all so much.
thank you.
I thought this was really wonderful. I think I'm gonna switch
Appreciate
in to some of like there's only two like fun questions, I guess, non-technical. I hope you're ready. You might seem a little nervous, but
it.
um, let's get into it. Are you all ready? How are you
Oh,
feeling? Nervous, excited?
I think we're good.
Okay, Chris told me he did his research, so
Oh dear. I
my first question. Oh, also, I wanted to highlight. I put it on the screen, but just in case people couldn't see. Someone said, how would they reach out to you all? email them at sales@finclusive.com. Okay, my first question, and I kind of switched it up from the normal, right? But Kendrick and Drake recently had a little bit of a rap feud. And I would like to know from your perspective who won. If you don't listen to them, you could say, I don't know who those people are.
Go ahead,
I can
Chris.
do. I can go first because I found the Wikipedia page and that
Oh
immensely
dear
helped me
God,
on
you
that.
really did research this.
So I'm simply going to go with I think Drake won because he has a neat plane and I like planes. So I'm going to go with
I like
his Drake
airplanes
Force
is your
One.
answer. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to reinforce my late Gen X, early millennial ability that I'm slowly falling away from pop culture. So I wasn't completely sure on this side of that.
Okay. What about Dennis?
I didn't realize planes was an option. I guess I'm going to have to go on the other side and take Kendrick. Just because I've got to be anti-Chris. I had no other thing than that. Yeah. Someone's got to take
There's
the other
no
side.
reason.
Plus, I've got to support America in this fight too. Yeah.
Oh, hey, I'm thanks for y'all's input. I loved it. I loved how y'all came to the conclusion. One person did their research.
Oh, I agree earlier.
Another
Yeah, it
person.
was a clean sweep on Kendrick.
Yeah. Okay. So, some people think Drake won, but
Some.
I would say Kendrick won. But it's okay if you don't know. He just know Kendrick is a Pulitzer Prize winner. I can't say the word, but yes. So he's more lyrically talented. But I love that y'all still try to try to answer. Awesome.
But
Last question. Oh, go ahead.
no, it just comes down to America versus Canada in the end. So.
I
So
just really like maple syrup, Dennis. It's
Yeah.
I
Fair.
just do.
it's okay. My husband unfortunately liked that or thought Drake won. So all right. So last question is this one is also, I guess, hard. But Chris, you told me you did some more research again. What's your favorite Beyonce song?
All right.
Dennis, you get to go first this time.
Yeah, this is a how do you just personal favorite? Because I think kind of like the one
Yeah.
that really shows it interesting in the range is like Summer Renaissance is
Okay.
interesting. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, but you're going cultural icon, yeah, you can do some formation. And then I think Sorry is kind of a fun one too. But yeah, I guess I'm going Summer Renaissance.
Okay, a real Beyonce fan here.
Nice job,
Not in
Dennis.
my family is so yes, I by osmosis have become one.
Okay.
My wife and my daughters, yes.
So you had no other choice but to
No,
hear.
I had no other choice, and then I was like, okay, and then now yeah, a huge fan. But yeah, I've only got to see her
Oh,
once
that's
though. It is fun though.
Mhm.
Have you seen her in person?
Yeah, 2
Yeah.
times.
Oh, you've got two.
That's
That's excellent. I just got the one. I had to be the old dad there with the kids. Yeah.
What about you, Chris?
well, as my kids are considerably younger than Dennis's, it's a case of we're still in the cocoa melon phase in this house, so we didn't have the Beyonce love yet. Right now, Taylor
Gotta get
Swift
work
is
on that.
being piped through the house, but
Uh,
for me personally, I like her the collab she did with Ed Sheeran for Perfect. I really like that one because
yeah.
redheads stick together, so that's why it's a good pick.
Oh, solid.
That is a good song, though.
Yeah.
And what about you, Rizzle?
Oh, wait, I feel like I asked the same question on every live stream.
Oh,
I
dude.
just switch it up all the time. Yeah.
Ah,
I
okay.
think I'm gonna pick Halo this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's a
Nice.
good.
Are you changing it?
I just switch it up because people might be getting bored. All right, y'all. Thank you again for joining the live stream with us.
Brilliant.
Thanks for
Thank you,
sharing
guys.
your knowledge. It was great.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
yeah, thanks to the audience as well. Do you have any last things you want to say before I completely close us out?
No, I appreciate you guys all joining in. This has been great. Let us know if you've got any questions on it, and happy to work with you guys on what this looks like and delve more into it. But appreciate spending time with us.
Yes, thank you.
Cheers.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
We announced it. TBDEX 1.0 SDK is now out.
TBDEX is an open protocol that makes moving value around the world much more efficient and streamlined. We're solving this problem with TBDEX by building a standard open source protocol that anyone can use for free and plug into.
We're super excited to have developers be able to start looking at this technology and start implementing it. We've put together a new financial protocol that we believe can fundamentally revolutionize the way that we think about transmitting value around the world.